and hope that he won't be smart enough to realize that this is the one word that he's got to falsify in some way. If we're looking for a signature, like we suspect the signature was Ford's, and we have a suspect here. A signature should not be written. We should not ask him to write the signature 20 times because of several reasons. Because after a while, even a normal person's signature will, if you ask him to write his signature like 10 different times, by the 10th time it'll get all scrolled and it'll be very different from the original one. After a while, people are tired of writing the same thing over and over again, so they're very lazy with their writing. So naturally, the signature written several times will degrade. So if we ask for them to write a person's name, we will ask them to write, let's say, a paragraph, like after dictating a paragraph in a book, then ask them to write, the suspected signature, and we want to see if it's this person. But we don't ask them to do it 20 times. It's true that we want the person to be to write a lot, because again, the more they write, the more their habits will come in. So we're not going to say don't just write the signature a lot, because the suspect's signature will be very different from even the suspect's correct signature. So the fact that it might be different from the forged one does not mean anything, because it's different from his. So if we want a signature and we want him to get into the habit, write, so that his habits will take over, we're going to ask him to write a paragraph and then his signature. That way, his signature will be part of his natural style of writing, and it will not be degraded. So that's the idea. It's interesting. There are times that we know that the real person signed this document after writing his signature 10 different times. So we know that that the person's signature the real person's signature must have been very degraded. But if we see that on this question document, the signature was like a perfect signature, then we start suspecting things. Hey, if this is the 20th signature he signed, the 20th signature he did in those 10 minutes, it was supposed to be, let's say, the last of 20 documents, and we see it's a perfect signature, we start suspecting, wait a minute, his signature should have degraded. If it didn't degrade, it probably wasn't his own. So the idea that signatures degrade after repeated writing the signature is an important idea. Also, another possible reason it might be different is that one is in print and one is in script. And the subject, we want to get an exemplar from him, has to be told to write in print or script. I mean, the two are going to be different. So we must get them to write in the same style as the question document writing. In all these cases, whenever we ask for an exemplar from a suspect or from a person of interest or a person that we believe actually did sign it, or to prove that the person legitimately signed it, in all cases, we always get an experienced document examiner to look at the question document. It's sometimes possible because of many reasons. First of all, they'll be able to say, okay, these are unique style of letter combinations. We want, when we want the person to write our dictated exemplar, we want to have these letters specifically, because these are going to be very easy to tell whether he's the right one or the wrong one. He matches the writing or not. So an experienced document examiner must be consulted before asking for any exemplars. Not only that, they can even tell just by looking at the question writing that there might be a forgery. For example, they are experienced in the field. They might notice where the pen was lifted. Like if you are trying to copy a person's signature, you're going to be very clear that you are going to get every little loop and line correct. So if you're getting a little bit off, you take up your pen, start again where it's perfect again. So they're going to notice a lot of these pen lifts or line jerks. Let's say you're trying to curve it exactly the way that the real person curves it, so you're going to do it in little lines to make sure it's exactly perfect. Or sometimes you're going to, again, your hand, unlike a person who just signs it, it's called fluent. They write in a fluent fashion where their curves and their loops are very fluid. It's not going to have tremors, But if a person is trying very hard to keep it right in one specific way of curve, his hand's gonna shiver a little bit. So they can identify pen lifts, lines of tremors. There may be many other signs. So we always get an experienced document examiner to look at the question documents before we ask for exemplars from our suspect. So this is all for handwriting. Now it's a whole different ball game when we're dealing with papers that were printed out and possibly falsified, or typewritten words. You can't use handwriting analysis, of course, but these typewritten things can be falsified. And sometimes, whether they're falsified or not, sometimes we have, let's say, a ransom note or a threat, some kind of or a threat, or a letter that comes together with a letter bomb. Then we recover the letter, and we want a typed letter, and we want to know where this thing come from. So sometimes we can tell the make and the model of the computer printer just by the way it was written. So again, we don't have the way it was printed on the paper. The way for example, the way the printer has the ink get onto the paper, whether it's an inkjet or a laser printer. Different printers will have the words or have the ink get onto the paper in a slightly different way, and using a microscope, you can sometimes tell the difference. So in this case, what we often do is we say, okay, we suspect it was this person's printer, so we're going to ask for the same. We're going to use that person's printer. We're going to demand the printer. We're going to send a print job to the printer with the same words, and we will compare usually under a microscope. We'll compare the words on this exemplar, meaning where we know the printer printed it, to the words that were, let's say, on the death threat in their letter. And so we can actually relate the printer to the question document, whose source we want to know. So it's not just in the way the words are printed on the paper, also the way the ink manages to get on the paper. Not just the way the words appear after they're entirely words, but also the way the ink is deposited on the paper. For example, some printers, let's say here you have the T and an H. Some places the printer says, okay, I'm going to print the T and the H really close together like this. Some places a little bit farther away when it's the way it goes, the way the printer decides to put. And sometimes it's the way the ink splashes onto the paper or gets bonded onto the paper is slightly different from printer to printer. So we can actually identify the printer. Furthermore, the ink that the printer that was printed out, we can analyze it in an HPLC. An HPLC is high performance liquid chromatography. This is the subject of chromatography. We're not going to go. We went into this quite a bit before because chromatography is rather popular in forensics. So basically, but again, just a very brief review. HPLC is where you have let's say a tube. And it's filled with something that sticks to whatever liquid is going through it. So you put your tiny ink sample, it doesn't have to be that big, right here, and we cause something to flow through this tube. The different parts of that ink from the printer, the components of that ink will stick to the tube in different places and in different ways, and will flow out at different rates. And because of that, we'll be able to tell what the components of that ink was. So we can analyze things with HPLC, and different printers will have different chromatograms after they go through the high performance liquid chromatography setup.